Use 3 words to explain how you think people view disability.
Infantile.
Pitiful.
Sad.
I guess when you start to deal with like real life scenarios, like going to university and like trying to like live independently and like learn to drive and like gain employment, you start to face like more barriers and challenges, and then that's when you actually realize like, oh, okay, like I am disabled and like I'm experiencing these things because I am disabled.
I don't think about disability really at all. I'm Dom, and I'm not Dom from PG, and I'm not disabled Dom, I'm just Dom. If there were 2 words we see most in client creative before we've given our thoughts and feedback, it is probably inspirational and superpower.
Yeah, I would personally avoid inspiring and superpowers when working with brands.
Hello and welcome to the Purple Goat podcast. Today I'm with Dani and Dom, and we're going to be talking about how the world views disability versus how it actually is. We'll talk about their own self-identities as disabled people and how that's changed throughout their lives, how people view disability, how brands should approach disability, what about the words inspirational and superpower that we see a lot associated with disability. So this and a lot more in today's episode, and again we're at ID Studios, so let's go. Hello guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. Today I have you here to talk about how the world views disability versus how it actually is. So I have some questions for you, and I want you to tell me about your own views and your own journey of being disabled, if that has changed throughout your life.
The juice.
The juice, we're here for the juice. Right, so to start with, I want you to try and use 3 words to explain how you think people view disability.
Ooh,
Should we take it in turns, one each?
Sure.
pitiful.
Infantile.
Nice.
Oh, is it back to me?
Yeah.
We can do 4, so you do 2 each.
Depressing.
Yeah, depressing is a good one. A close neighbour of depressing is sad.
Right, okay, we got the idea. So what words would you now use to explain how it actually is, from your opinion?
For me, I'm going to say normal because I don't know anything different. So it's just my normal.
Hilarious is the word I'll use. And the reason for that is that I think that I've been in a lot of situations in my life that I wouldn't have otherwise been in if it hadn't been for the disability that I have.
I think I'm going to say belonging because I think you get a sense of like being disabled, you're a part of the disabled community, and like you belong like in a really great group of people that can all relate and understand like your experiences and what you go through. So,
and I also like, I suppose it's positive, and again that is something that we don't necessarily see depicted in our media or in the words that we picked up on at the start, but you know, people really struggle to get their head around it, and you see the sort of cogs turning when you actually say, no, like I personally have an overarchingly positive experience of life. Of course there are difficult moments and barriers, but like in different ways everyone has that, and I'm not for 1 second saying that disabled people don't have the huge amount of difficulties and barriers at moments, but there is also that positivity that you can hopefully do have in life as a disabled person as well.
Nice. So after you've said those things, would you say your view of disability has changed over time, and your self-identity as a disabled person, how has that journey been throughout your life?
Yeah, my identity with being disabled has changed massively. I know we've spoken about this a lot, Dom. Like when I was younger, I didn't really identify as being disabled. When someone would ask me about my arm, I'd literally just say like, "Oh, like it just doesn't work right," or like, "This is how I was born," and like I would never call myself and say that I was disabled. Just would never happen. And then I guess yeah, as I got older and probably more around like late teens, early 20s, I guess when you start to deal with like real life scenarios, like going to university and like trying to like live independently and like learn to drive and like gain employment, you start to face like more barriers and challenges. And then that's when you actually realize like, oh, okay, like I am disabled and like I'm experiencing these things because I am disabled too. And like there should be ways to, yeah, like society could be way more inclusive and like try and combat those things. But yeah, it's definitely shifted. And then obviously working at Purple Goat as well, that's kind of helped shift a lot of the way that I identify with disability too.
Very similar for me, really. I think in my younger life, when I was at school, I was probably slightly different to Dani in that I was like always so kind of acutely comfortable and confident with my disability, but I just had, I would say like, almost an aversion to like hanging out with disabled people and doing things that disabled people do for no other reason than it just wasn't part of my world, and I had such a like rich existence in what I was doing. I just didn't feel the need to connect with that part of me. I was so comfortable with my disability, but there weren't really any barriers on me. I could do anything I wanted to do. My parents encouraged me to do everything I possibly wanted. I went to a mainstream school, had non-disabled friends, I went on holiday. It was just a very, to use Dani's word, a normal existence. And then exactly the same as Dani, like you grow up and you have these moments where you're like, oh, there are very, very real barriers that mean that I'm experiencing this in a very different way to someone else. My options are, reduced. There are additional hurdles to jump through. I have to fight and advocate for certain things to get like parity of experience. And I think that that's when you naturally just sort of lean more into that community and feel more connected. So yeah, they're quite similar in that way, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I wanted to ask you, Dom, was when you were 18 maybe, you did a documentary.
Yeah.
Was it with Channel 4?
Yep.
Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, so again, it kind of connects to that point. And so me and my mates were planning a trip around Europe, interrailing after our A-levels, and we knew at the time there was this sort of narrative in the media around it, like ASBO culture. Every teenager's sort of hoodlum street rat, like doing terrible things, and I had again normal group of mates that were just really caring, considerate guys, but we were also the same guys that like going out and have a good time, and you just didn't see that in our media. So we were sort of planning this trip around Europe after A-levels and before all going our separate ways to universities, and there was this sort of collective light bulb moment of, do you reckon we could get a bit of extra money if we sort of made this into a TV show? A bit of beer money. And I remember very clearly being in Burger King as a group, like thinking about this. Then went home and didn't realise I was writing a treatment for a TV show, but essentially was telling the production companies on an email like, yeah, it's going to be full of jeopardy because I'm disabled, and my mates are great, and they throw me around like a piece of luggage, and then sent that off to about 20 production companies, and it came back, and about 4 or 5 were like genuinely really interested, which I now find out is extremely like unusual and rare for that. There must have just been like the perfect storm of what was happening in our like society, and then what I was kind of presenting must have been a sort of very much of interest in that moment. And to cut a long story short, we went on a trip. It was lovely. It gave me amazing insight into the world of media and marketing, and I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for doing that when I was 18. But the bit that I know you're getting to was we called it Crip on a Trip, and that was a name that came about because when I was 16 and went away with friends, we all got t-shirts made going down to Newquay, which was a rite of passage through our school, you know, when you finish your GCSEs, and my t-shirt said Crip on a Trip, and I genuinely can't really remember when I came up with that name or whatever. But calling the documentary Crip on a Trip felt perfect at the time. I couldn't be further away from the historical negative depiction of Crip in that, like, you know, in that documentary, in my sort of relationship with my mates, and it was me kind of owning and claiming that word to be what I wanted it to be. However, like, that I was really comfortable with. We put a little caveat on the Channel 4 website. Obviously, as you can imagine, Channel 4 loved it as well because it was quite a Channel 4 name. But nowadays, like, people ask me, oh, would you call it that now? And I say, well, probably not, only for the fact that I now, both personally and professionally, have like grown and are so much more connected to the community. And I know that there are certain people that absolutely would be, you know, offended by that word and offended by that use of the word. And so I've basically like just sort of assimilated a lot of the community's thoughts and feelings into how I project myself. So I think that as 18-year-old Dom, I'm really happy he did that. I wouldn't change that at all. But if someone asked me to name something today, I wouldn't probably name that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And you, Dani, is there any advice or anything that you will tell your younger self?
Ooh, I don't think so. I think I wouldn't really change anything. Like, I definitely had opportunities when I was younger, like playing football and stuff that I literally had because I was disabled. Like, I played for a disability football team and stuff. I think if anything, like, actually kind of leaning into the community a little bit earlier would have been really great for me. Like, when I think back, I can't even remember knowing anyone else that was disabled, bar like the teacher that I had at school that had the same disability as me, which is super, super rare, and like I think was just like a 1 in a million kind of event that happened. But except for that, the only other time I saw disabled people was when I was at the hospital having like my appointments and stuff. So I just wasn't really like exposed to the community, I guess. And I think like nowadays with social and stuff like that, like people can find other people who are in like very similar situations to themselves, and I think that's super, super powerful.
Nice. And going to kind of like what we do at PG and the mission, obviously we are talking about disability all day, every day. But in terms of you outside of work, how does your own advocacy look like? Does it look any different to kind of like what you do at work?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
I think that people find it quite surprising that outside of work, even though we probably work to more hours than we should, there's not many hours outside of work, that I don't think about disability really at all. I'm Dom, and I'm not Dom from PG, and I'm not disabled Dom, I'm just Dom. And I'm not going to say that I'm sort of not as aware or not as progressive as I am in work, because I still have all the same values. However, like, I personally just I'm not really affected by things that we advocate and push for professionally. I don't care, and I know that sounds crazy, but someone can say anything to me on a personal capacity, and as long as their intention is good, I don't really mind. Obviously, I still want to make sure that I've got, like, you know, equality and equity of experience in what I do in life, but I'm also happy to kind of just go with the flow and things just happen, because it's hard to constantly advocate for disability all day, every day in what you do, and there's moments where you just want to, like, I won't say blend in, but you just want to crack on, and so as much as in the professional capacity we're at the like bleeding edge of being as progressive as possible and constantly trying to push those we work with to be, at that bleeding edge of sort of progressive tonality and process and everything. On a personal level, like, you don't want to fill your brain with that all day, every day. And some people find that really, like, unusual, I suppose. I don't know whether that's the same for you.
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, like, as you've said, kind of advocating for disability all day, every day can be pretty exhausting. Like, and I just like to switch off when I'm not working. And like you said, like, you're just Dom, I'm just Dani. Like, I just want to be myself and, like, live my life and not really think about it too much. I think, yeah, like, all of our clients are really great. Like, they're all trying to genuinely make a change for disability and make a space that's more inclusive, but some of the conversations we have can be really challenging, and, like, it is just, like, exhausting, as you've said. And yeah, it's just nice to kind of have that break and just have a little bit of space where you can just be you and, as you said, crack on, like, just get on with your life and enjoy it and not think too much about the bigger picture all the time.
I would say, like, on that point, we sometimes don't even realise the sort of natural sort of advocacy, consultancy, hand-holding that we do all day, every day. We're there to, like, change the clients we work with, like, perception around disability, but also their actions around disability. So we are constantly, I suppose, on, if that makes sense. We're constantly trying to challenge their assumptions, challenge their, habits, preconceptions, and then ultimately what they do. And it might not feel like it in the moment, but you're just constantly representing PG, but constantly representing a progressive view around disability, and that's quite an unusual thing to sort of have, not even at the back of your head, but it's sort of deep inside, like, all day, every day. The only other bit I was going to say was, the bit outside of work. We've got this really progressive professional tonality in work. Outside of work, I'm sure we'd both be cancelled. If you get us just with our families or our mates and the things that we do, again, though, like, that's just us being us. In our little bubbles, we can say what we want, how we want, to who we want, and that's quite a funny, like, juxtaposition of our professional lives and our personal lives as well.
Nice. I have 2 words that I want to see what your thoughts are. One of them is the term inspirational, and that associated to disabled people. So how do you feel about it?
I think you're actually gonna get an interesting answer from both of us.
Okay, I'm intrigued there.
Personally, I don't really mind, as in, like, inspirational, because I personally find things that I am not used to, haven't seen before, have been educated by. Is the word inspirational? No. Is it, like, insightful? Yes. But it's a very close step. And so when people say it, sometimes I'm like, I know that they don't mean any harm by it, so it doesn't offend me, again, like, on a personal level. But it isn't the right choice of word, because me just being me shouldn't necessarily be inspirational. It can be kind of insightful and educational, but, like, I don't want to be held on a pedestal for just being who I am. Obviously, professionally, like, we absolutely don't want, like, this polarized view of disability with triumph over adversity. Like, you're there purely to make non-disabled people feel good about themselves. So, like, on a professional level, absolutely not. But if you're going to say, like, oh, you're so inspirational to me, like, in a pub or whatever, I'm like, thanks. It just doesn't really have a, like, effect on me, if that makes sense, because I get it, but it's just not how we would sort of view a progressive conversation around that topic, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Dani?
I think for me, it depends, and it depends on the context. Like, there's so many, like, people out there who happen to have a disability that are doing genuinely inspiring things. Like if I'm on social and I see someone maybe that I follow that's doing something really freaking cool, that's gonna like inspire me to do something cool too, then absolutely that's the right use of the word. If you're just calling someone inspiring because they've got out of bed, got dressed, gone to work and lived their life, then that's not really that inspiring. And it's just like you're just saying that because you've got the assumption that disabled people like can't amount to much, or like there's not a lot of expectation there on that person to kind of live a really successful life. And like I guess for me it just depends on the context. I think it's really complicated obviously, and like as a community we tend to try and stay away from it because typically it is used in that environment where the disabled person is just existing and living their life, and it's like, oh, that's so inspiring. Like, that is it? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I want to be inspired by disabled people. I want like disabled people to go and do really incredible things, and then I'm like, oh my god, wow, like I want to do that too, or like that's inspired me to do X, Y, and Z off the back of that. And in that instance, for me, like it's totally okay to use that word. Like, it's not. But again, like Dom said, like personally, I'm not that bothered, but I think I'm also a little bit like desensitized to it at this point. Like it gets thrown around a lot. So
the moment it is like relatively triggering is when you're literally going about a totally innocuous like activity, like sat on a train and someone's like, good on you, man, you're so inspiring, you know, like whatever else. But then you realise the only reason I'm saying that is because they're like, your life being you in that chair looking like you do must be shit. And so like that's why they're saying inspiring, because they're essentially saying, well, I'm just going to top myself because like if I was like you, that's awful. And they have no idea that as much as they are trying to convey something positive, all they are doing is showcasing their inner prejudice with that comment. So that's like at the extreme end, and those are the ones that are like, okay, thanks, yeah. But then as Dani said, there are moments where absolutely anyone in society can inspire us, like, and so it's kind of very situationally sort of specific as well.
Yeah, context is key, 100%.
Nice. And the other term is superpower, related to disabilities, and calling your disability your superpower, that we see a lot in the media.
I'll let you go first on this one.
I think it's a tricky one. I think for me, my disability, I will never view it as a superpower. Like, it makes my life more challenging and difficult, and like, yeah, there's not really anything superpowery about it. Like, that's just how it is. But like at the same time, I wouldn't change not being disabled. Like, but yeah, I don't know. The term superpower is really interesting. I know that there are quite a lot of people that do use it and like kind of see their disability as a superpower. And I think if that's the way somebody needs to view it, and like that helps them, then like they have to do what feels right to them. For me personally, it's just never going to be a term that like I identify with, or something that I would ever use to describe like my personal disability. I don't know, for me personally, like I'm not gaining anything from my arm. Like, it's not giving me like some extra skill or like doing anything incredible. Like, it like doesn't work. My arm doesn't work, so there's nothing superpower about it. But
I think for me, I agree with Dani in the sense of like, I wouldn't change who I am. So that's not part of the conversation, in that like, oh, you know, disabilities just made me like a better version of me. Like, no, like, I'm very disabled because of my brittle bones. So you can't say it's like the superpower there. Of course, I can like understand that there are things about my lived experience that have given me a different perspective, outlook, whatever it might be, on life because of my disability, and that's the bit I wouldn't change. I would say that I'm a relatively perceptive person because my whole life I've spent probably, you know, observing more than others because I've kind of been sitting back watching the world go on around me, and maybe that's why. Is that a superpower? No. Is it part of who I am? Yes. But so I think that, you know, for me, superpower isn't, again, relevant and I don't kind of connect with that phrase. However, for some people, as Dani said, you know, the way that they view the world because of their disability that feels different to them, and I think that there are certain individuals that their disability means that they do kind of feel that they're over-indexing in certain ways, and of course if they want to use that word, like, that's absolutely fine. We wouldn't professionally say it on someone's behalf because it's, you know, totally personal and up to them, but if they do, then that's absolutely, you know, that we obviously encourage that, you know, that people should always be able to, like, own the language around themselves. And however, there is this sort of, like, you know, brands ask us, oh, what's this perfect way of describing all these different things, and we often say, like, there's no perfect sort of playbook of all the language you have to use to all the different situations, because it can be so personal. However, we would always, like, encourage individuals to lean into language that works for them, obviously with a slight caveat of certain words are very offensive to certain people, so just be mindful of that when using them. But, like, if you're saying that behind closed doors and it's the way that you like to talk, then how can anyone sort of have any issue with that, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. So taking this to the professional side of you too, and at PG, if a brand wanted to use any of these terms, what would be your approach towards that?
I probably wouldn't recommend either. I think for me, when I think about, like, Superpower, or as we saw in, like, the 2012, like, Superhumans, like, campaign, I think it kind of, like, categorizes a really diverse group of people and kind of paints them with the same paintbrush, and then there's kind of the expectation from society, because they've seen one depiction of, like, what that one individual's experience of disability was, and kind of applies that to every single person that happens to have the same condition. And, like, for me, that's, like, really dangerous in some instances, because the disabled community is so diverse. Everyone is so different. Like, you could meet two people with the exact same condition, and their experiences and their needs and everything would be, like, at different ends of the spectrum. So yeah, I would personally avoid Inspiring and Superpowers when working with brands.
If there were two words we see most in client creative before we've given our thoughts and feedback, it is probably inspirational and superpower. So it's a common thing that people come to us with, and then obviously we have to help them work through that, but we won't naturally advocate for the use of those words in client comms, as Dani sort of, you know, very sort of clearly kind of explain why.
Mm-hmm. So what would you like to see brands do regarding disability? Instead of using those words, how would you like them to approach it?
I mean, we often switch out the word inspirational for, you know, aspiration, you know, in terms of what the community is trying to do, on trying to give you aspiration for X, Y, Z. It's a small tweak, but it is closer to what we want to mean. And then superhuman, there's not really, like, that's actually just a path that isn't necessarily one we would recommend going down at all. I think that 2012 was this moment in time where actually that did push a conversation forward. It did take a disabled community that had only been pitied in the media and put them on a pedestal and celebrate them, and that was awesome. But we are now 13 years after that, and so luckily the conversation has progressed again, and so now we want to lean into the nuance and the intersectionality of disabled people and not try and make them either one thing or another, and just have their disability as one facet of what makes them who they are. And so, you know, leaning into genuine human insight and lived experience to come up with the thing that is the thing you can champion about that individual.
Anything to add, Dani?
I think for me, like, I think it's sometimes feels really easy to portray a disabled character in a creative as kind of like that hero, or like doing something really incredible, or like going above and beyond, like triumph over adversity. And for me, I'd really love to see kind of like a messy reality of what it's like to be disabled. Like, we're all just human. Like, if you speak to your colleague at work, they'll tell you that, you know, they've got 1,000 things going on in their life, and like they probably had this really high moment and then they had a really low moment, and there's like kind of lots of in-between moments too. And I think we often lack that when we look at disability representation. We don't kind of get that like messy reality of just being a human who is living with this condition, and it just is what it is. And like, I really want to start seeing that from brands. I'd love to kind of just see a disabled person be a disabled person, and it not be kind of this like oversimplified story that's being told. Like, quite often, yeah, I feel like that's what happens when disability is brought into the conversation. It's quite like, well, this is this person and it's A to B, where actually, you know, everyday life you go like, it's all up down all the time. It's like a roller coaster, and like I love to kind of see that like real messiness to disabled characters and the way that they're portrayed in creatives.
And if each of you had to choose a brand that hasn't done anything regarding disability up to this point, that you would like them to do something with us, quite nice, and with all these things that you were talking about, kind of like forgetting about that, Inspirational and Superpower and all of that, which ones would it be?
We don't often say this because, you know, as you know, we try not to sort of, I won't say the word shame, but like call people out for not doing inclusive work, because we obviously want to create the safe space. However, and I'm going to only lean into something that I love dearly, but I'd love to do work with Formula One. They have their like We Racers One kind of inclusivity campaign, but broadly speaking, it's not really touched disability, and you know, I'd love the opportunity to work with them to drive natural accessibility and inclusivity into their work. Formula One is a very accessible sport because 99% of people are watching it on a screen at home, and so there can be very inclusive ways to bring people into that, and you can do that obviously through sort of different types of media content and accessible content, but then also like the actual narratives that we see in and around Formula One can be more inclusive. So I suppose, because I'm an F1 nerd, or bore, as you might say, I would probably pick that.
That's a good one. I think for me, I'm a massive football fan. I love it. My weekends revolve around what games are on the TV and who I can go and watch. And I love women's football in particular. I play it, I consume it all the time. And obviously women's football has only just started to kind of be picked up and like kind of had this massive growth moment. But I would love to see some disability representation within that. I think there's so much that the sport has to offer, and I think clubs in general are getting a lot better when it comes to accessibility and inclusion, but particularly women's football. I think, you know, we've got the Euros coming up this summer. It's the time to do something really special and really great, and kind of make sure that we've got that representation on screen. I know there's so many players that have come out and spoken publicly about their conditions as well, and it just feels like a really nice opportunity to kind of say that women's football is for everyone, and like make sure we've got that representation in this like summer of sport that's coming up.
Nice. I didn't know the Euros were coming up.
Yes, and Jose will tell you the rugby's coming up as well this summer.
Nice. Anything else you'd like to add around this topic?
I suppose from my side only just that, again, like on a professional level, we take it very seriously because we're being asked by clients to give them guidance and best practice and handhold them forward. On a personal level, people shouldn't be scared to start to broach these conversations in a informal way, and if you're not sure, then just communicate like a human and you'll most likely get a very human answer. Things around language, things around identity of disability. Like, it's just part of who we are, and like any other aspect. So don't ever feel scared to, you know, engage us on that human level about certain aspects of our life. Obviously, the saying that, like, disability, and I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, like, you wouldn't go up to someone and say, what's the most traumatic moment of your life ever? So there's obviously a time and a place to talk about certain aspects of disability with people. But as you get to know them better, all of this stuff just naturally comes out in the wash anyway, because you're connecting with them as a trusted friend, colleague, acquaintance, whatever it might be. But yeah, never feel kind of othered or afraid or, you know, unsure whether you can engage in these sort of conversations, because we, you know, if your intention is good, it's fine.
I think we're just human, just like you. Like, we're just people at the end of the day, and like, I think sometimes there's the view that like disabled people are like, I don't know, can never do anything wrong, or like with these like just never get anything wrong. And sometimes disabled people are dicks too, and like we swear and we like mess up all the time, and like we're just as messy as you. So as Dom said, like, never be afraid to just like have a conversation with us, speak to us, like find out a little bit more. Like, yeah, we're all here, like we're all exactly the same. A lot of the time we're going through the same things. Like, we're not kind of this other weird like alien species, which it does feel like that at times. So yeah, I think just that, yeah, we're here, we're human too, and like we can connect on like a human level. It doesn't need any like weirdness or anything in between.
Dani never hesitates to call me a dick when I'm a dick.
This is true, it happens on a daily occurrence.
Yes, there we go. And on that note,
Nice. Well, thank you guys.
pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.